No, I was just saying I'm a big muscle car fan. And one of the things that I really love about muscle cars, especially kind of the sort of rat cars, that they'll look like death on the outside, and then they pop the bonnet and there's this chrome plated, big block Chevy in there, or with the headers and all that sort of stuff, and that's kind of one of the things that the vibe that I really like about these is that it's kind of very rustic on the outside, and then you've got this kind of flashy zoot suit lining on the inside.
Welcome to the Over Under podcast, where we talk to musicians, builders, and a variety of industry folks to discuss their stories, insight, and experience surrounding the music business. Hey everyone, it's Hank with Rattlesnake Cables, and we are doing the very first episode of the Over Under podcast. And I am so excited to have Markus Reeves of Reeves Electro as the first guest. How you doing, Markus?
How you doing? Thank you for inviting me on. It's a privilege to be the first guest on Over and Under.
Awesome.
Looking forward to it.
So you're based in the UK. Where exactly are you at?
I'm right in the Midlands of the UK, so a small market town called Kettering in Northampton, which is literally about the most landlocked point of the UK you can find. Right in the middle.
I followed you for a while now, and I've done just a little bit of research. And one of the things that I wanted to start off with was the whole idea of in 1992 you fixed a fuzz face, and I kind of wanted to go back to 1992. Like, what was going on in 1992? Were you in a band? Why did you fix that fuzz face? What was the deal with that?
Okay, so I was doing my photography degree in a Manchester University, and I was in a band, and I was singing in the band, and generally kind of being there, kind of producing them as well. And I was a slightly more mature student. So I say mature student, I was 26, these guys were 18, 19. So at that age, 5 years is quite a long gap,
Oh, yeah.
And the guitarists there, great musicians. Actually, one of the guitarists there was like, I've got this thing, and then these old fuzz faces were junk. In the 90s, it wasn't really until we're getting into the 2000s that the whole thing with collectible 60s music memorabilia or equipment became a thing. He gave it to me. He said, "You know what? If you can have it if you can fix it." I was like, "Well, I poked around at it with the soldered things on it and wiggled it, and then I got it working. I've no idea how I managed to get this thing working. I don't really know, to be absolutely honest, what it was, as far as what transistors, whether it's germanium, all those things. I had no idea then. And, got it working. And, I kind of, that was it. I was that massive adrenaline and dopamine release that I got when the thing worked. I've been hunting ever since. Literally,
That's cool.
Every time I sit here and fire up a build, I get a little bit of that again, and that's kind of the beating heart of why I do these things,
I remember 1992 very well. And, I remember there's no YouTube, there's no, to even crack open any kind of device and look in there. It's like a mystery box with no one that could even help you with what's going on. So I'm like really impressed that, you're able to get something working back in those days.
It was
probably, yeah.
It really was.
So what was the first moves after that? Did you get like a book to start working on this, or just getting in there?
Straight to the libraries, and started finding out about, basic electronics. Literally, what a resistor was, what a capacitor was, you know, and all that sort of stuff. And there wasn't anything specifically about guitar pedals. It wasn't really, honestly, until Brian Wampler came on the scene with his kind of his book and all that sort of stuff that that my knowledge started to accelerate. Really, it was still a case of working it out for myself until then, you know. And then I suppose the internet. I can't remember when I started kind of learning on the internet. I was quite an early adopter. I was using kind of news groups and stuff like that very early on. So, I guess it was kind of late 90s, early 2000s. And, that's when my knowledge really exploded, to be honest. I started actually picking up what other people had learned, you know. So, so then kind of my movement through building pedals really was just about doing stuff for mates and rubbish side hustles, basically fixing stuff, the guitars. I spent quite a while building hobo type, cigar box guitars and all that sort of stuff, and tiny little amps. Hang on one second. Still got one here. This is a fuel can.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it runs off a 9-volt battery. It's got a little op-amp amplifier in it, 1 watt. I was building those sort of things, you know. I used to go busking with that.
Nice.
And that was it. And I thought that was going to be the thing, you know, doing that was going to be the thing that was going to be the side hustle that worked, really. Not side hustle, but, I was working full time. And what
were you doing?
Done. Sorry?
What were you doing when you were working full?
I worked in the travel industry. I worked in the headquarters of a reasonable sized travel operator in the UK called Travel Sphere for 10 years, up to the wazoo, to be honest, you know. And couldn't do it again now, you know. But So I learned to build websites. I learned to market things. I did all that sort of stuff off the back of that. And it kind of didn't really work. It floated along. It didn't really make any money. And then I guess I started the idea of pedals. I can't really remember where the idea of saying, well, maybe I should do this instead came from, but I just decided to kind of switch. So I had all that backup of, you know, I'd made all the mistakes making websites and, you know, and having Instagram and doing all that sort of stuff. I was kind of fairly well versed in it when I decided to do it. And that all coincided with pandemic, with the guys on That Pedal Show doing a big feature. You know, it was just like a perfect storm, really. And then I was very happily made redundant from my corporate job. It almost within 2 weeks of the TPS thing happening. And
wow,
you know, it was just like, you know, thank you. Whoever is looking out for me has ticked the right box finally, you know. And it's been 5 years, and you know, I'm here now with the new workshop.
Yeah. So 2013 is kind of when it started. And then 5 years ago is when it like really, the commitment turned to, I guess, Reeves Electro.
I reckon that's about right. Well, 2013 is, around about 2010. I had print business. So a lot of the stuff that I do kind of, you know, it's one of those things where you kind of aim for your comfort zone, you know. So the screen printing is something that I'm, you know, really versed with. When I was younger, I was 10 years as a screen printer. So around about 2010, I was flat broke. I was sofa surfing. I'd had a business that had gone under big time, lost my house, everything. And I had lots of time, but no money. So what I was doing, I was harvesting stuff from broken electronics I couldn't even afford to buy circuit boards. So I'd start soldering them together without the circuit boards. And they were real rat's nests. Yeah, 210 was really when the point-to-point thing started. And then a few years went by and I fell into the job the job in travel. And then I was start to really develop the idea of these point-to-point pedals. And, from being a rat's nest to something a little bit more, pleasing. And it just all got out of control, basically.
Gotcha.
It turned into what I do now. So
yeah. I want to step back just for our viewers. I should have started with like what Reeves Electro does. It, makes amazing pedals, like what Markus said, point-to-point circuits, acid etched enclosures, and new old stock components. They're incredible. And the part I love about this is like how amazing they look on the inside that a person on the street wouldn't even know what was going on when they look on the outside. They'd be like, "Oh, it's a cool pedal," but it's a magic surprise if they ever take the back off. But that one looked like it had plexi on the back, huh?
Yeah, it has. Yeah, I do a plexi. I call it a plexi lid.
Nice.
So people can, it's a little optional extra if they want to display it, and they can do. Yeah.
So go ahead.
No, I'll just say I'm a big muscle car fan. And one of the things that I really love about muscle cars, especially kind of the sort of rat cars, that they'll look like death on the outside, and then they pop the bonnet and there's this chrome plated, big block Chevy in there, or, with the headers and all that sort of stuff. And that's kind of one of the things that the vibe that I really like about these is that it's kind of, very rustic on the outside. And then you've got this kind of flashy zoot suit lining on the inside, Yeah, and as a player, I'm pretty certain I've got some kind of form of ADHD. I hate to put the D on the end because I don't see it as a disorder. It's a personality, ADHD, if you ask me.
Yeah, there you go.
And when I'm playing, everything has to be right in my mind for me to get to that point, the flow. And knowing that that's right inside there takes me to a place. It's one of the little keys to get into that, that room of flow. And not everybody is like that, but there's quite a lot of us, I think, that are like that. And they are my tribe, really. So there's a lot of kickback against what I do in, online and in forums and, on Facebook and stuff. And I'm glad, really, because it would be really boring if everybody was the same.
Yeah. No,
if we all like the same stuff, then there wouldn't be this amazing explosion of pedal wielders that we've got these days. Yeah. So,
there always be haters, and it's always great. I've seen how you navigate that, and I always think it's really interesting. You're always great with it. And I think people just want to like say stuff. And I love that, I feel like you make it positive, and it just, you get through it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a saying, and I don't want this to be kind of insulting. People say you can't argue with stupid, and I don't mean to. I'm using that saying in a very broad term because where people have a very distinct, different viewpoint from you, you're not going to change their mind. And I'm not calling them stupid, but I'm just using that phrase to explain my way around it. You're not going to change their mind. So I tend to have a humorous discourse with them. There's a few people that do that online. There's a UK singer-songwriter called James Blunt, whose Twitter or X feed is hilarious. His comebacks on people's digs at his work are just brilliant. One springs to mind. Somebody said, "Oh my God, somebody's playing James Blunt downstairs," and his reply was, "Brilliant. I'm on my way upstairs." But
nice.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah.
I want to kind of segue into the family business aspect. So I know your daughter Izzy is involved with the business. I know she has the daughter board series.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, like how did she get involved? Was she always around and interested in electronics, or did this just pop up recently? Or
she Yeah, she's always hung around. Yeah, she was always interested in making things from before she can remember being interested in making things. She's always been very crafty, very hands-on, very interested in how things work. And it wasn't really until least recently, it's kind of came about organically, really. She wasn't enjoying her job that she was in at 3 years ago. And I would pay her basically just a little bit of side money to test components for me. Because that's a really, I didn't find it at all interesting, sitting there just checking and cataloging transistors, checking, all the various components. And she loved it. She found it very cathartic and very calming to do. Sorry, my cat is screaming to come in. 1 second.
That's okay.
Come on, Woody. He's like, Dad, you're on a podcast. I want to be on the podcast. So she found it very, very, very calming to do. Come on, mate. Come and sit up here. Very calm. This is Woody, by the way.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So, he's famous. So yeah, she found it very calming to do and, was asking more and more questions and how to do things and, I said, well, why don't you try building a pedal? So we got a couple of kits from, a UK supplier. Big shout out to Lee, a Fuzz dog. He'd be a great interview, actually. Anyway, and we did a session of just. I was showing. She never sold it before. Well, actually, she had sold it before. She got a scar to prove it from school, and she honestly took to it like a duck to water, and literally in the same session, obviously with a bit of guidance, she'd built a pedal. Albeit on a PCB, and it just sort of went from there. She really enjoyed doing it, and she was motivated because she wasn't enjoying a job, all that sort of stuff. And now it's got to the point where she was living with her mum at the time. We're separated. She was living with her mum at the time, and she was just desperate to move out, not for any other reason that she's growing up and wanted to set out in life. And it's a beautiful thing that I've been able to help her on that journey. Now she's living in a farmhouse with a bunch of other creatives, an artist and a tattoo artist, somebody who does podcasting, political podcasting, another guy who has a very niche print magazine. So it's kind of, I'm very, very pleased how she's taken to it, really. And it's
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
And so she just comes to the shop to work on that, or does she actually work on that line at that place?
Initially, she was working out of here or out of the old workshop, but then we kind of worked out an easier workflow for her. So she builds PCBs, she populates the PCBs over there, and then she comes over here to do all the make up all the enclosures, and then takes them over and puts them together, and it comes back and we test them and ship them from here. So it's
awesome.
It's bit and piece, but she does the stuff that needs the kind of the concentration and the zoning in at home. So she's got that space that she can build for herself, really.
Awesome. Now, I know you do, you use new old stock components, those transistors and all that. And, I've seen the photos. You got, buckets of them. So my first thing is always are you ever worried about running out of stock? Is it hard to score, find some warehouse in Germany that has some rare ones in there? What's that like?
I had that happen right early on where there's one of my earliest pedals, a Black Hat Sound. I had 150 of the transistors for that. And, I thought, that would last me ages, And then when things all took off, I very quickly ran out of them. And it was good sort of 6 months that I wasn't able to make any. And then I came across a guy with a surplus electronics store in Scotland. He had these.
Yeah. Oof.
So, this one hasn't been opened since 1973. Yeah, this bag is still sealed. So, yeah, that taught me a lesson in that I found them and I bought hundreds. I tested them. I then said, "How many have you got?" And he told me, and I said, "I'll have them all."
And
that's what I do now. And there's an element, the DIYer in me, the DIY kind of guy in me feels very guilty about that because, it's kind of cutting off access to these things for, for other people in the trade. In the hobby. And I made that mistake. Well, not mistake, but there was one batch of transistors that they were really lovely old Motorola BC174B, used in a few bizarre pedals. But anyway, found a stash and I tested them, posted on Instagram saying, "Look what I found. Oh, these are great, blah, blah, blah." And then literally went back to that person the next day and said, "Right, I'll have that 2000. Oh, no, I sold them this morning. Somebody from Belgium had them all." Now, there's a lesson.
That's a lesson.
There's a lot of things that you learn, with doing this, and that was one of them, really. But yeah, I've got a stash. My most recent, this is where's that cat gone? So yeah, some 1991 Motorola BC107s, still in the original package.
Wow!
So
I'm surprised. 1991, they were still making those.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to see where the cut-off dates are for things. In fact, they were still making germanium in the 90s. You can still buy new germanium transistors in the 90s, not for production, only for repair and spares, mostly.
Okay.
Yeah. So, which is surprising. You think of, well, mate, right, you're going to go out. You've had enough. Off you go, fella. Go and catch some mice. Yeah, so the, where was I? Yeah, GE, in the 90s is crazy. You don't think of it. You think of it as being stuff from the 60s, but in the 70s. So. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about point-to-point. We showed the back of your pedal. We've talked a little bit about, before you could have a circuit board, you were making a little rat's nest. Let's explain to people exactly what point-to-point is. And is there a benefit? Is there not a benefit? Is there let's get into that a little bit.
Yeah. So basically point-to-point is that each component is connected to the legs of the next component. There's no PCB traces in the circuit path, which is how fuzz pedals or any pedals and radios and all sorts of things were built way back in the day, before making PCBs was an efficient way of doing things because they didn't have the technology or the machinery to do it. There's all sorts of viewpoints on its sonic advantages, and like any circuit, especially high gain circuits or fuzz circuits, layout is probably the primary thing that keeps the circuit's purity intact. If you have certain components too close to each other, certain runs of audio, too close to each other, you'll start to develop things like, I'm going to get in the weeds a little bit now, but a parasitic capacitance, which is it's part of the tone. It's like a fluff around a tone that you can't EQ out. It's like sonic artifacts that are there. And I've genuinely found that point to point seems to have a purity, and it seems odd talking about purity when you're talking about fuzz tones, because they are, they're the least pure sounding thing. But I think the point is that because they are so massively over amplified within the circuit, if you have anything going on that you don't want to be there, it's going to be introduced, especially early on in the circuit, and massively amplified. And then that kind of stops or it alters the thing that it's doing, quite dramatically. So yeah, long story short, I think it keeps the integrity and the purity of the circuit much easier much better. I was just thinking about I was going to say also maintenance I find is a lot easier on point to point as well, because as long as you're fairly handy with the soldering iron, you can literally just undo one component and put it in. You don't have to take circuit boards out, take the upper circuit boards, take all the solder off. Suddenly a pad comes off because you've overheated it and the circuit board's ruined and you have to put a jumper in and all that stuff. Whereas point to point, fairly straightforward. So yeah.
Gotcha. So I wanted to talk a little bit about a personal story for me. I didn't want to really go into anything about my world, but we briefly talked about it on Instagram, and it was that Peter Vogel, the artist.
Yes.
So for years, I've discovered this Peter Vogel, and literally years go by, and then I forget who that person is. And then I'm reminded about this person, and I have to, when I'm telling someone about him, I can't find him. I have to do a bunch of research, and eventually I'll Google and find that person again. And I've gone through this cycle maybe 2 or 3 times in my life. And I was like, why can I not remember this guy's name? And then recently here at the shop, I was talking about this guy. Of course, I can't find who this guy is. I can't remember. And then I saw on your Instagram feed that shot of Peter Vogel, which I was like, that's the guy. And you said his name. And I'm like, oh my God, I cannot forget this person's name. And I just think it's really interesting, because the reason why I like your feed so much is because it reminds me of Peter Vogel. It's that kind of art. And I was so impressed and shocked and amazed that you knew who this person was. I've never met another person that knew who Peter Vogel was and what his art was. And for the viewers who are watching this, Peter Vogel is an artist that basically makes sculptures, point to point components that you interact with like light and sound. You can clap and make things happen. An amazing artist. I believe he's German, and just amazing stuff. Just imagine a radio without the enclosure. Just the radio parts. It's amazing.
Yeah, with proximity sensors, and it's more like a lot of them are more synth based. They have proximity sensors and a light dependent diodes and all sorts of things, so you can play them with your hands. It's quite a thing.
So how'd you come across him? Like, what was your first?
When I lived in Leicester, which is a city nearby. When my lost weekend, if you like, of being broke and sofa surfing, I was part of a electronics art group, and there's a community within electronics called circuit bending, which is they'll take a Barbie, one of these speaking Barbie dolls, and they'll get in there and they'll muck around with the circuit and make it say different things or react. They'll put proximity sensors in the eyes and just do weird and wonderful things. Another guy had got a piano and put speakers behind the strings and a guitar pickup on a wand, and you could then put the guitar pickup over the strings and it would feed back. And it was this weird instrument, and it was just these guys being really, really creative with electronics. And Peter Vogel was like, he was the messiah, for those guys. And that was where that really I got interested in really deep diving into electronics then. And I guess that kind of stuck. And it was a joining of my experiences really, when I was like, well, I know you can just join components together. I don't have any money. I'll do that. And then as I started to think, I need to tidy these up a little bit, I then kind of referred to Peter Vogel and thought, okay, it can be done. You can make it look really nice. So let's do that. Yeah, really massive influence. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, there's a great documentary on YouTube called
I
Sounds
was
of
just going to say
Shadows.
about that.
Man,
yeah.
So good. Yeah. That's so awesome. I've really enjoyed following you on Instagram, just for that little tidbit alone, is awesome. But I mean, I've really enjoyed your Monday Minute.
Well,
I'm also really impressed with your ability and willingness to share. I feel like you go way beyond the Call of Duty for, sharing what tools that you like to use and like what processes, techniques. I love that, I saw the one with the adhesive issue that you had on your thing. So I love the problems too, because people deal with problems all day long, and it's really interesting to watch people work through those problems. And I enjoyed that process that you did to get that adhesive off. And I was happy for you when you got it off. And I was like, wow, that's great.
They're here. Yeah. So for anyone who's not aware, so these are a huge Bigfoot pedal that I make, and they're painted on the inside. And I masked them out with an unknown masking tape. And when I've got a curing oven in the back room, there's a room behind that green wall there. And the adhesive didn't like being warmed up and it stuck. It was like, you have a peanut butter jar and you peel the label off and it's just this goo that you can't get off. I know it's, 10 of these flipping things I've got to try and work out how to do it. Eventually, I mean, everybody chipped in as well. There were loads of people suggesting stuff. And there's an automotive product by a brand called Autoglim. I don't know whether it's an American brand as well, but it's a tar and adhesive remover that doesn't attack paint, because obviously badges and things are stuck on with adhesive these days, and it's a lifesaver. Because honestly, I was thinking I'm going to have to remake these, So, that was good. But also, you say about the sharing, and as I said, I'm still a DIYer at heart. That's where I came from. And, I just remember thinking, how am I going to find this out? What am I going to, how am I going to do this? And there are people like Brian Wampler.
Oh yeah.
Absolute legend. I'm really influenced by his generosity of his information as well. He really is one of the guys that kind of led the way for me to show that these secrets aren't necessarily the thing that is what's making you successful. You can still do well with your business and let people know most of what you know. I'll be honest, there are some things I'm not going to say because I've found them by the really hard route, and they're my kind of secret sauce. Now, I'm sure Brian's the same. There's certain things that he'll, keep to himself. 85% of it, I'll tell anybody, maybe 90.
Yeah.
If you catch me on a good day.
On a good day. Yeah.
But because it's just such a cool thing to do, and to see people. I run an experience day here where people can come and build a fuzz in a style that I call the tour grade style, which is still
turret board.
We're kind of, it's a sort of, really. It's my own kind of version of turret board where there's just strip boards that support a point-to-point structure, really. It's fairly straightforward for a newbie. And I've had 8 people now come in. 6 of those never have touched a soldering iron before they went away with one of those working, without any intervention from myself, so, and I find that really rewarding, really super satisfying to pass that on, really. So it just comes naturally, the whole kind of, I guess teaching thing is a nice, it's also something that I can do that relieves it's quite intense making these things, so it's nice to kind of go, right, okay, I'm in between batches. I need a day of doing something else, so I'll work on some content for a few bits and pieces. And I've got a whole list of new ideas that didn't come from ChatGPT, actually, which is interesting. I'm going to be doing a basic 60-second walkthrough audio paths on fuzz circuits.
Sweet.
So I wanted to challenge myself. So yeah, I've got Fuzz Face, Tone Bender Mark II, Big Muff, and Tube Screamer on the list so far. So
that's awesome. So when you say trace, I mean, you talking like an audio probe through it, or are you actually what do you mean?
Literally just, I'll have a schematic and I'll just go through and say, right, this is the audio path goes through here. This bit does this bit does this, that bit does that. Basically, it clips here. It's non-inverting. It's soft clipping. It's, try and get it into a minute. I think I can do it. I've had a couple of run throughs.
Wow. And, I think that would be amazing.
Yeah. In fact,
I want to sign up for that.
The fuzz face is the most difficult one to do.
Really?
To be honest, because there's a lot of magic that happens in the fuzz face that, the something like a Tube Screamer is very logical. The audio travels one way, whereas with a fuzz face, there's a negative feedback loop, which has a very, very large effect on, again, I'm not going to get too deep in the weeds here, but it has a massive effect on how the fuzz face works. Whereas with the Tube Screamer, the negative feedback is just really to make the op amp operate properly. So I've had a couple of run throughs on the fuzz face one, and I'm at about 2 minutes at the moment. So, right. We'll get there.
So I wanted to quickly get into the shop. I know because I watched that content too, or you're basically, rebuilding the shop and the whole, your exhaust system for your paint booth and all of that stuff. So was it in the same footprint as the old shop? Or is it a whole new shop?
So we moved house. So this is a whole new postcode basically. So the old, again, it was that kind of perfect storm where we'd been looking for a new house to move to for a year or so. And it really got to the point where the old shop that I built was just too small. The old one was a third the size of what we've got here. So it's quite, it felt like a luxury. I got in here and I was like, how am I going to fill this barn? And then today, Sarah, my wife, and I were just packing up some pedals, and we were kind of getting in there. Well, I need a bigger workshop. So that's the way it is. But yeah, so this was an original. It was a brick built workshop, very, very basic. And so what we did is we knocked out the end of the brick built workshop. This is where that's the original wall that went across here. And then we just built this section on just to extend it a little bit. Yeah. Really, really lucky. And also back here, there's an extra room, which is where all the dirty stuff happens. So that's where all the drilling, painting, etching, all those sort of businesses happen.
That's awesome.
Izzy, she drew she was like, oh, we need something on that wall. I'm like, oh, okay, you come up with an idea, and she did that.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. It's amazing how when you have a new space that you'll find a way to fill it up. It doesn't matter how big it is. You'll find a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in fairness, I wanted it to look, the old workshop that my kind of, I don't want to say social media journey, but I'm going to say social media journey, started there. And I learned lots of things, and I had lots of things on my wish list. And a nice background was one of them. So I knew that one of the walls was not going to be used for practical things. It was going to be to look nice on camera. So I only had 3 walls to work with, and then I wanted daylight. So I'm in front of here's a window in front of me. So there's another wall that was out. So I've actually only got, the reason it feels like it's filled up very quickly is I've only actually got 2 walls to use from a practical point of view. So,
gotcha.
But that's fine. I can work like that,
Nice.
Yeah. And being at the end of the garden as well, the other workshop was in the garden. This workshop's in the garden. Yeah. I'm spoiled, really, and I think, I couldn't go and work for the man again. If I really couldn't, it would destroy me. I probably, if I had to, I would. But yeah, the thought of it makes my blood run cold, to be absolutely honest, spoiled. Yeah. So, one question I've got for you, actually, what has just come into my head, Under and Over, the name of the podcast, is that a reference to correct coil wrapping technique for your leads?
Yep.
It is.
Over under. Yep.
Yeah.
I look at it as a multiple meaning, so it's, I loved it for an idea for a podcast title because I really wanted to go into kind of unexpected details with guests, something more so than just, what exactly they do. I love kind of like exploring different things. So that I kind of was like, that's the over under kind of concept. But yeah, that's where it stems from.
Brilliant. Yeah. Because it's a revelation when you realize that how well that works. I used to run a lot of open mic nights and had my own, ran my own PA for the band for quite some years. Untangling XLRs, 25, 30 meter XLRs was just like, and then I thought, let's try this daft thing. And then you just throw it across the hall and it's like,
that's why
it's done. And just don't look back. Yes. I think that is with a 3, 4 meter, 5 meter lead, guitar lead, maybe not quite so critical, but when you're doing a 20, 30 meter lead across a hall, it makes a massive difference.
Yep. No, that's awesome. That's cool.
Getting off the beat.
No worries. No, it's fun. One thing I kind of wanted to talk about was, today is the last day of NAMM. Has there been any desire to show at NAMM at some point, or at least visit if you haven't?
Yeah, 3 years in a row, I've had intentions to go and hang. I've got a lot of crew out in California. God bless everyone in LA at the moment. We don't need to talk too much about that. Yeah. Tough times. But, I've got a lot of crew out there and, there's open invitations all year round, but specifically at NAMM to go out and hang, So, shout out to Seeker FX, R2R Electric. Oh, long list. I can't remember them. Anyway, lots of guys out there. So I'd love to go out and walk the floor. I don't think exhibiting at NAMM, even if it was affordable, because it's not a cheap thing to do, even if it was affordable, I don't know what benefits I'd get from it. I don't use distribution. I don't use dealers. Very much business to consumer, which I think is the way forward. I mean, look at guys like Meris who have taken up that model now.
Yeah, Chase Bliss.
Yeah, Chase Bliss. I think it's really, that model has really come into its own in the last probably 10 years or so. And NAMM is really, as well as being a perk, a jolly and going out and just networking, it's really about meeting your dealers and meeting your distributors and finding new distributors and all that sort of stuff. So it doesn't really fit in for me. But the thought of going around, and I've never met Brian Wampler, but love to, go and just hang with the guys and just walk around. There's a big show in the UK called the Birmingham Guitar Show, and it's a 2-day show. It's kind of UK's version of NAMM, really. And I go and walk around both days. It's exhausting, but yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's definitely something I'd be interested in. It didn't time very well this year because the workshop.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't crowdfund, but as the workshop was done in a way, I needed to raise some funds, obviously, to kit it out and to get it done and get some contractors in. I was kind of planning on going to the bank like you do, and just a long rambling conversation with a really good friend of mine. He said, well, why, as long as you're completely transparent about it, why don't you, do the waitlist thing again and go to your customers and say, I need to build a workshop, buy a pedal, you'll get a t-shirt. And the response was absolutely breathtaking, and tiring, because I'm literally just finishing building all those pre-orders now. And I'm of the type of mind that if I've got orders to get out, there's nothing else in my existence apart from getting those orders out. So the thought of going to NAMM with having orders to still get out is just not on the cards. So next year,
yeah, maybe.
Yeah, if you're in Anaheim, watch out.
Nice. Yeah. So NAMM, I would call is a happy acronym. Let's talk about a bad one. GPSR. What do you feel about that?
Now that's interesting. I've just been talking to somebody. So GPSR is General Product
Safety
something regulation. Yeah, which is the EU has introduced some need for certification and conformity with anything that is sold into the European Union. And for the likes of Behringer, they're probably pretty much doing that. And, Boss and all those guys, they've got it down. But for me, some of the conformity tests seem to be ridiculously expensive, and getting that done. And then you have to have a person in the EU as your representative. I've done a lot of work on this, and there are some workarounds. I've got a representative in place who at the moment I've worked this out with this guy, a friend of mine who lives over there. He's going to go forward to a lot of the small builders in the UK and offer services. So yeah, I will be selling. I'm not selling into the UK, into the Union at the moment. This came in December last year.
How big of a percentage of your customers are EU? Do you sell mostly to the US? Is that a huge portion of your?
It's about 75% US. And then there's about 5% into the EU, and the rest is in the UK. And actually, UK versus US per capita, it's about the same. My sales are, it's just the US is a damn big place, So, but saying that, I get, I've had quite a lot of contact from customers in the EU. When are you going to start selling back to the EU? So yeah, it's on the cards, I would say. Within the next 6 or 8 weeks, I suspect I'll have everything together. In all honesty, a lot of the documentation about what you've got to put in with your products. I've bought some Behringer pedals, and I'm literally copying the relevant stuff from them. Things about disposal, how you need to dispose of these things. Yeah, various bits and pieces that don't have to be backed up with tests and what have you. I can just take off other pedal builders who've had their lawyers check it.
Mm-hmm.
I'll ride that wave.
That's good.
So yeah, but it's tough, and there's a lot of small builders that have just gone, I'm not getting involved because there's massive fines. Well, they've touted massive fines. Whether that'll actually be a thing, I don't know.
Yeah,
but yeah. tough.
So next, I just wanted to, kind of talk about a little bit of a business hat to wear right now. As a business owner myself, I'm always trying to think of like, what's the future for my own business? And instead of just saying like, oh yeah, like how's the future look for Reeves Electro? I mean, can you see what it looks like in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years? And what is that
we've got
vision? What do you see?
We've got a kind of a step plan. We think we've got a few scenarios kind of mapped out and ideas dotted that would be a handy way forward. No firm plans to go in one direction, but yeah, opportunity. I've learned through my life that if you have to be open to lots of opportunity and see, and so when the ship sails past, grab it, sort of thing. So yeah, we've got a few ideas of where it wants to go. In all honesty, it's more in Izzy's hands, running forward, how she would like to see things go forward. Yeah. So
it's a tough question.
I've got to this point following my nose, in all honesty, following my gut instinct. I've tried in the past. I had a fairly successful print business back in the late 90s, early 2000s, which I did to a formula, and it worked to a degree, but there were lots of things that I thought I should do and I didn't, because that wasn't the way businesses were run. And when I didn't luck into this, but when the stars aligned for Reeves Electro to do its thing, I just really was like, if I think it's cool, I'm going to do it, and that's kind of what I've followed. So yeah, we've got a few ideas. None of them might not come off. But I'm not giving you much here, am I? But to be honest.
No, I mean, it's a tough question. And, that's very fair.
I think
I'm in the same boat as you are. So.
Yeah. I mean, Izzy may well go off and study architecture for all I know. I've always tried to not be the guy who says, right, this is the way forward for you, because, pressure is not a healthy thing, so motivation has to come from within. And if she decides that this isn't her thing, after a few years, then, that's cool, so, yeah, but I don't think, she really does love it. So I don't think that'll be, it'd be an option, but, who knows? Yeah, there'll always be pedals, mostly drive. I don't think we'll ever make things like choruses and digital and all that stuff. So that limits to a degree, where we'll go. And I don't think there'll ever be anything mass produced involved. So, that's fine. Yeah, works for us.
Speaking of the pedals, I mean, do you have anything kind of coming up? You got something new that you can?
Yeah. So over the last year, actually, it's going to be almost a year. I've just been head down, paying back for this really in the pre-orders. And so I've had lots of time to think. So yeah, there's a whole load of new ideas. And the Black Hat Sound is kind of like the flagship pedal. And I've got lots of variations on that core circuit. I think the final iteration of that is going to be the Black Hat Sound Studio, which is like a Fuzz workstation.
Ooh.
So 2 presettable biases that you can foot switch between. The tone stack you can switch in and out of, but it's got an attenuator, because traditionally if you have a tone stack, it takes a lot of volume. So when you switch the tone stack off, you get a massive jump in volume. So I'll put an attenuator on the defeated position, and then a fuzz and a drive section. So it's a big unit. So that's one. And there's the Super J, which was a pedal that I did in a Mark 2 tone bender enclosure, absolute pitter to build. I'm never going to build those again like that, but it was a great circuit, and there's actually a kit available of that on Fuzzdog, as I mentioned earlier. You can actually buy a kit, a Reeves Electro endorsed kit from Fuzzdog of that Super J. But I'm going to be making that, and that'll be on a PCB actually, in similar style to Izzy's PCBs.
Vintage style.
Yeah, the traces on the top and kind of uncoated. Yeah, and a few other fuzzes, possibly a Jordan Boss Tone, which is a great fuzz. I really, really like that fuzz. So yeah, lots of new things coming.
That's awesome.
So yeah.
Well, cool. I think we're over an hour right now. That went by quick.
I could talk for England, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, why don't you let people know how they can find you? Like, what's the best way to communicate?
Okay. Well, obviously my biggest channel out into the World Wide Web is Instagram. So at Reeves Electro is where you can find me, or on the website www.reeveselectro.co.uk, and latterly on YouTube at Reeves Electro as well. I'm starting to do a bit more YouTube content now. I've done some deep dives into the new Behringer releases, which are really interesting. Yeah, I like cheap pedals as well as expensive ones, to be honest.
Yeah, they're all fun.
And the new Behringer, I don't know how they do it. I could keep talking about this as well, but anyway, yeah, I don't know how they do it. Their vibe, it's an optical vibe. It's not, and it's like $50. Absolutely ridiculous. Made with Chinese children's tears, though. That's the only downside.
Oh my God.
Sorry about that, to bring it down at the end, but there we go.
So yeah. I know you do your pedal drops and your pre-orders, and you can buy pedals directly on the site, or is it best for people to do drops, or like, what's the best move?
Get on the mailing list. Head up to either my Instagram, there's a link in my bio, or if you drop onto the website, you'll get a little pop-up that will say, do you want to join the mailing list? Join the mailing list, and I email people, well, when I've got something to say, basically. So it might go a couple of months without anything, and then you'll get a few emails as things are coming up. So yeah, I basically give people a month or so, a couple of months of notice on the drops, and I'll drop a batch of 10 and then give a date and a time. And yeah, sometimes they sell out quite quickly. Get there and be ready. Make sure you've got your fiber internet fired up and ready to rock. I generally plan out the drops once a quarter. So there's a list at the bottom of every email that I send out with all the dates and times and things and what's going out. So yeah.
Awesome.
That's it.
Well, no cool. Worries. I can't thank you enough to being the first guest.
No problem, Hank.
I mean, I had a list. I was trying to figure out who would be a great first guest, and then I thought you would be amazing, and I was right.
Well, it's a privilege. Thank you for
it was a great conversation.
I really appreciate it, Hank.